we did Wizard of Oz, and it was great. So yeah, I was proud of them. All right. Well, I guess we can get right into it. I think I would love to just kind of hear initial thoughts about both the Queen of Water as well as this chapter, just anything maybe that stood out to you particularly, or, kind of where you were. I will say, like, the book was really tough for me until part 3. It was just it felt very harrowing. And just, I had a really tough time with it till kind of when she got back with her family. I really was, I was like not a fan until that point. I guess. And then I felt like the chapter, I really liked that it focused on, like that it talked about poverty, and how like that can affect things. Other thoughts?
The book was kind of tough for me too. I just couldn't find myself like getting into it until, like you said, where she was when she finally was getting out of it herself, and like the ending, watching her, what's the word, her transform into this, oh, I can be whatever I want to be, and I am not my past, I'm not my family. That was kind of cool because I think a lot of students might feel stuck in that. Um, Especially like the poverty and the abuse. Um, like I have a lot of kids who are poor, so that by technical terms, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that they might feel like they're stuck in that kind of environment. Like she felt like this is who I am, until she figured out that it's not who I am. Like that doesn't define me. So I also liked that, you know, bullying, how they defined bullying as it comes from a place of fear, which is kind of what I try to tell first graders. Like they're bullying you,
Mm-hmm.
not bullying. I try not to use the word bullying, but first graders use it like it's
Yeah.
just willy-nilly. They're bullying me. I'm like, well, they want, first of all, want a reaction out of you. And
Yeah.
second of all, it's, something that is probably not coming from a good place. So we need to just ignore it. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Um,
Rebecca?
I I thought this book was interesting because, like, in the past, some of the books we've read the chapter and we read the book and we were like, I'm not sure how the two
Yeah.
equate.
Mm-hmm.
This one I felt like hit like all the
Mm-hmm.
points of the chapter. It was about stereotypes and about bullying and about um you know um what was interesting is, and it's all within one culture.
Yeah.
It so it broke it down. This talks about abuse, talks about child labor, it talks about so it hit like, I mean, everything that the chapter talked about, all the different kind of areas, it talked about those areas, and
No,
it had
yeah.
examples of those
Yeah.
areas in the book. You could take a chapter and just read it, for this part or this part or this part. I didn't have as much difficulty getting into the book. I actually saw the book more as her fighting skills.
Yeah.
Um, her as a young girl, and I really enjoyed the like kind of little little gotchas that she had with her employer, where, I'm not going to let you win. I'm going to do these things when you're not around, and I'm not going to get caught, and despite when I do get caught, I'm still going to do it,
Yeah.
just to show you that I
Yeah.
can. And so I saw it as a story of kind of a young girl's fighting spirit, um in that sense. I also saw it as like a coming of age story,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, where if we study in my classes, the older kids, Bildungsroman, which is coming of age type novel. It's written for, it has a specific type of kind of um, qualifications to make it that way, and this definitely falls in that category, where there's some type of journey, there's some type of obstacle, there's some type of the protagonist finds themselves, whether it's by choice or by circumstance, in a kind of difficulty that they have to overcome and grow and mature through a process, and they come out the other side. Kind of, it looks like a grow in some way grows, whether it's their age, maturity, or their character overall.
Mhm.
And I definitely think that this novel falls into that category, so I read it in that way.
No, yeah, I think that's a interesting way to look at it. I think it was just like, I don't like, I feel like graphic is like the wrong word, because it wasn't like super, I don't know, I think just her language just made me feel very uncomfortable at times, which I think was purposeful. But yeah, it was just like, especially like the dynamic between her and Carlitos, like that was, I was glad that that was, that nothing ever happened, but I was just like on edge the whole time. Like even when she was younger,
Right.
I was like, this is not gonna go well. Um, so I wrote a couple questions about the chapter that we'll kind of talk about in our classrooms, and then we'll get a little bit more into the book. So kind of going back to bullying, Caitlin, you mentioned a little bit, but sort of like looking particularly, like, have you had experiences with bullying in your classroom? I think probably we all can. And then if like, have you ever used a book to kind of talk through bullying or a situation? And like after reading the chapter and reflecting, is that a tool that you think you would use in your classroom? Like, can you think of a book that might be a good way to have some of those conversations? Like they had the example about the teacher in the wheelchair, as well as I can't remember the example of the student off the top of my head, but there was a teacher in the wheelchair, and then they had something about a student as well. So has there been a situation, like, can you think of a situation of bullying in your classroom that maybe you feel like you could have handled differently? And do you think that books are a good way to kind of bridge some of those conversations? Or plays, I guess, since some of us are theater teachers.
Hold on. Let me
Yeah,
look
no,
up the
you
name
can,
of this.
yeah,
I've
just
done
like,
this, but I can't remember the exact name of the book I
yeah,
used.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'm excited to hear. Because I always, I think in high school it's a little difficult to feel like, oh, let me pull out this like book for us to like talk about the situation that's going on. But like obviously stories mean so much to us as people. Like she talks about that, towards the end of the book, like she wants to tell her story in a book. I think I did my book talk on this, but the play She Kills Monsters, I think covers a lot of different identities and things. And I think that that could be a good touchstone stick. So that Caitlin is about like this girl, her sister dies and she realizes that she doesn't really know her. And then she finds out that her sister was gay and like played Dungeons and Dragons. And it's really about her exploring like, who is this person in my life? And I think also that none of us really know what people are carrying. So I think that could be a play to maybe study, or if you're producing it, do some intentional conversations. Would be one I could think of.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that would really relate with your high schoolers.
Yeah.
Um, when I was student teaching, I taught
Mm-hmm.
in fourth grade, which I hated.
Oh
But
my God. I have
um,
two fourth grade boys. I don't know how people do it.
I'm like, so bullying obviously was like bad in the fourth grade. So I did a lesson using the book. It's called The Juice Box Bully.
Okay.
And it's about this kid who comes to a new school and he's got like a bad attitude and whatever. And his classmates teach him about the promise they have with each other.
Mhm.
And basically the promise is to like stand up for others and kind of help people not bully. And
Okay.
that was really powerful to see kids understand that, first of all, I shouldn't bully, but second of all, I can help a friend who I do see bullied,
No, I love
because
that.
in fourth grade, it's really bad about, I, I can either pitch in or I can do something to change it. And so I think
Right.
that book was powerful. Um, Basically the whole first month of school with first graders and everyone is like community building. So a lot of my lessons are based on like, how do we treat each other? Um, One of my favorite books I use, I've talked about it before on here. It's called The Recess Queen. And
Mhm.
it's about this girl who like just terrorizes the playground. And basically that's like it's a running thing throughout the whole year that um to have a friend, you have to be a friend, because
Mhm.
this recess queen was basically a bully, and then somebody came up to her and was her friend and she stopped being a bully. And so that's something that I think for first graders is something that visualizes for them a situation that they can be a part, like not dumbs it down, but it like shows them like, oh, I can be a part of this situation and here's how I could act differently. But The
Yeah.
Recess Queen is my probably favorite book to use. And I think finding more books for kids is a great way for them to kind of, like I was saying, picture, visualize situations and kind of become problem solvers.
Mhm.
Use that book and then taking that book and, okay, now how can we apply it to our own lives?
Yeah. No, I think those both sound like great examples.
Yes.
I have a little bit of a different take.
Yeah.
So I haven't really had, our school is pretty unique in the sense that we don't really have a whole lot of bullying situations. But um, my foray into middle school this year has given me a little bit of a different perspective. I my son, when he was little, well, when he was in fifth, sixth grade, he was about the size of a kindergartner,
Oh, bless
and
them.
so he was picked on incessantly. And my husband and I took the tact of, when he'd come home and complain about it, we'd say, the traditional things. We'd say, it's all about the bully. Just ignore what they're saying. It's not about you. It's about them. And and our our child went from like this really outgoing, fearless kid to a kid that didn't want to go anywhere, do anything, had no friends, was kind of in his room all the time and stuff like that. And I looking back, reflecting, I thought, gosh, maybe we didn't handle that right, because I think we made him feel like we weren't hearing his side. We were saying to him, yeah, yeah, we hear you, we recognize that there's a problem, but you're not the problem, so just, you know
Yeah.
kind of get over it, right? um Suck it up, buttercup, and things will get better, and just ignore them. Or, we the typical all the typical things. They're looking for a reaction from you, so don't give it to them, that type of thing. That wasn't what he needed. So fast forward now, I have a little boy in the sixth grade who is, I mean, like, he reminds me, not in he's like ADHD, but he he reminds me very much of my son in the fact that his stature and outgoing and stuff like that, and he's facing that same problem. These bigger boys in the sixth grade are constantly, to like I said, to me, it's not necessarily bullying. It's kind of it's and this was for Jason too. It wasn't like picking on him incessantly. It was excluding him because of his
Yeah.
size. telling him, you can't play basketball with us because you wouldn't be any good at it. Or you can't play with us on the playground because you can't run as fast as we are because you're small. Or you're a baby, you still wear baby clothes because of your size. So it was more of go play with the littler kids, that are more your size on the playground. So to me, yes, it's a form of bullying. It wasn't outright bullying, but this is the same type of situation with this little boy. They're like, you can't sit with us at lunch. Go sit with the third graders. They're more your size, or those type of things. And it really gets up
Yeah.
next to him. And unlike my son, who just didn't react at all, he just shut down totally. This little boy, gets very, very angry and upset. And so he was getting in trouble a lot. And I told him, I saw what was going on, and I told him, you know what? Anytime that you feel like they're being mean to you, that you and he said, because I can just feel it building up in me all day, and then I want to
Yeah.
explode. And I said, well, when you get those feelings, why don't you say, can I go talk to Miss Miller?
Yeah.
And why don't you come talk to me, and you can tell me anything you want to tell, and that'll get all that out of you, and then you can go back and you can finish your day. And he did that a couple times, and he said that helped so much because he wasn't getting in trouble. Because what was happening is then he's getting in trouble because he's reacting to them,
Yeah.
and then he's getting the consequences,
Mhm.
because they're not really doing anything overt, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're just making him mad, and then he's reacting, so he's the kid getting in trouble. And his dad happens to work at the school and work with us, and I said to him, I wish that I could rewind and go back and give my son more validation and not be the parent that was like, suck it up, you'll get over it, it's only for the year, you'll be moving on next year, they won't be with you, know what I mean, and you're going to get bigger and taller, and before you know it, you'll be taller than they are. All those types of things that kind of dismiss his
Yeah.
concerns, or feel like dismissing his concerns to him. And I said, which what I wish I had done and what I would advise you to do is to be the parent that says, I see what you're feeling, buddy, and it's not fair, and it's not right, and we can't change them. How can I help you? How can do we
Yeah.
need to go talk? And those type of things, which validate him more, um, so that he's able to manage his reaction to it better, and not become like my son did, an introvert who didn't want to make friends. And he's outgrown it now in his 20s, but there was such a rough patch through high school where he just felt alienated from everybody because he was so small. He even moved schools and didn't even get bullied anymore or anything, but he just, the way he wasn't open to friendships and relationships like he had been before. He was so cautious, he didn't trust anybody. So
Yeah. Well, I think that is a great example of like providing a safe space for students, like that you're just becoming that like trusted, safe adult. Like that just kind of for me resonates. There's been a student at our school who like had like an explosion similar to that of anger, and essentially it became like this whole rumor got spread and started about this school, like people within our community like
Oh yeah.
blaming
A
a
whole
15 year
Facebook
old,
page about it.
yeah, a whole
Yeah.
Facebook page about it that was like, this kid has threatened the school, all of this stuff, none of it true. And he's in one of my classes, and he's honestly so sweet and quiet. Like he would just sometimes get angry and like would feel like that, those explosions, but like never ever threatened anybody. And he's back at school now, but and I'm like think he's so brave because it was like this whole, everybody was making up all these things about him, but he's come back and he's like essentially showing people that they were wrong about him. And I think that just like showed a lot of character for like him and for his parents, because you know, it would have been so easy to just go virtual or change schools, but he's kind of, you know, holding his head up high and being like, I still deserve to learn here. But I
Yeah.
don't think he would have done that if he didn't have teachers and adults that he felt like were going to be a safe space for him to go. So I think it's just a reminder that we do have that power. I guess sort of with that, I was just kind of curious, like, have you ever had any like actual like training in bullying intervention or like professional development, or is this just sort of things, you know, that we've learned like through our own experiences or just from, you know, reading or anything? Like, has there ever been anything that's like, this is like step 1, 2, and 3?
All I've been, I mean, we're in the same county, so
Yeah,
I've had all the mental health
yeah,
trainings and stuff, which I guess is kind of close. And, you know, it's definitely taught me that all behavior is communication. Like, I
yeah,
mean, same thing with that kid. He was clearly communicating. So, I
yeah,
mean, some kids really don't know how to communicate. I'm angry, I'm upset,
yeah,
I'm frustrated. And some kids, like Rebecca, your kid gets so frustrated that I don't know how else to release it other than to scream or, you know,
yeah,
when, especially when people continue and continue and continue. So it's like, I think, and then in the same sense, like I have a kid in my class now who I wouldn't say he's a bully, but he is definitely not nice. Like he incessantly, you know, there was a while for like a straight month that nothing nice came out of his mouth towards
yeah.
people. I mean, calling people ugly, your mom is fat and ugly, like everything he said came out of his mouth and it was just straight up mean. And then I'm like, first of all, bullying is a form of fear. So what is he scared of? Why, like, why is this his reaction? You know, what is going on that is making him just release this way? And I think a lot of it is, I think he feels a lot of that about himself. So I've tried really hard to, not that all bullies need, I don't know, because I think both people, the victim and the bully, need a lot of like love and safe space because clearly the bully's going through something to feel the need to lash out. Like this kid, like I think that he feels a lot of that about himself, and I think that he feels alienated, and so he's taking it out in clearly the wrong way. And I think a lot of it is for attention. Not that negative attention is the attention he should get, but I'm trying really hard to be like, how are we feeling today? Great job. And just being overly positive. And I've seen a huge change. Like now he's overly positive to other people. So I
That's
think,
awesome.
I know, I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to say about the way people act, especially our students. And I think
Well,
that
that,
that's the one thing from in terms of bullying. And I know that they like there's a whole investigation that principals go through when bullying is brought up. Um, which is why they're like, we don't play with that word. Like,
yeah.
so I don't know.
I would say um that the training that we've gotten, um because this is only our second year as a K 4 through 12. So all the training previously has always been high school, was always part of suicide prevention
Hmm.
and all that kind of stuff. So any PD that we received was kind of in that tact, um, for student mental health
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Um, and then back to that middle schooler. The other thing is that even when the bullying, I mean, I hate to call it bullying because it really isn't, they're excluding him and that
Yeah.
is angering him. Um, but even when that is not their intent, he sees that as their intent.
Hmm.
So everything becomes about that for him. So then, even when their behavior changes, he's stuck. That's the problem we're having now is their parents have been involved. We've changed and they've changed their behavior. but he, one day maybe they don't want to share a book with him,
Yeah.
Just because they don't want to share a book with him, not
Yeah.
because they're being mean to him.
Right.
And he sees it through that filter.
Yeah.
So everything is through that. I think that's one of the things that we as teachers need to be aware of, is that once something like that happens, the child that's on the receiving end, even when it stops, they see everything through that same filter. It doesn't necessarily stop for them.
Yeah. No, I
Even
think
if the behaviors of the other students stop, for them, they see they experience, their experience is through that filter because it
Mhm.
changes them. So we should be aware of that, because like I said, he still gets in trouble because all those little bitty things now frustrate him,
right.
even though we've stopped the not playing the with us on the playground or whatever. They include him now, but then if they, for whatever reason, Johnny doesn't want to play with Timmy, then
Right.
Timmy says, he's, and so we get those outbursts still.
Yeah, well, and that kind of just sort of where our conversation is kind of brings me to the point, in the book, like I think we see lots of like generational like trauma and like very cyclical things. Like I think I think one of the beautiful parts was when she was talking about like how her father beat her, and it's like, well, he saw his father be beat, and it's sort of these cyclical things. Like, were there any characters or moments that you sort of maybe felt empathetic towards, or you felt like you could see the motivations of some of the antagonists, like maybe Doctora or her father, or like where the people were violent to her, like where do we're talking about the mental health of the bullies and things like that. Do you like, where do you think those characters, like where do you think the root of that was for them?
I think being a mother, I could relate to her mother, and she had in her head that one of the last things her mother said to her was, "I'd love to get rid of you,"
Yeah.
and so that repeated. Well, how many times as a mother do we say things we don't necessarily in anger with a
Right.
child that we don't necessarily mean literally? We're
I
just
brought you
speaking.
into this world, I can take you
That's
out.
take
Like,
you
Yeah.
out. Yeah. My one of my dad's favorite ones is we're gonna have a 3-legged race to the hospital so they can remove my foot from your behind. So, I mean, that's
yeah.
threatening a child,
Yeah.
and we don't think about it that way. And I never really thought about it that way as a child. I knew when he said it, he was very mad. Um, we do say things and do things as parents that we don't necessarily literally mean, that a child doesn't take it the way children sarcasm and hyperbole and all that stuff really are not in their repertoire when they're young children. They don't really get that. And so when we say that, they're taking those things literally, and that can really hurt their spirits like it did her. Um, you know, and I loved it at the end. Her mother said, I cried every night
Yes.
you were gone.
Yes.
And
So sad.
because I couldn't find you. And I definitely could relate to the mother character so much, because how could you not, with your child, how could you not wonder, are they being taken care of, are they getting enough to eat, or where are they, those type of things. So yeah, I definitely, the mom kind of, in for her, was kind of an antagonist, but I think it was just a misunderstood relationship, and taking things literally that weren't meant to be taken literally, and they lived a very rough life.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that her mother did and said was to prepare her for a rough life. When she would, get frustrated with her for fantasizing, dreaming about all these things and setting herself up, so she got the new shoes and all this stuff. She'd get frustrated with her because I think she wanted to keep her child from being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an expectation of all these wonderful things that were happening, you can't be disappointed. And so she wanted to protect what she was doing, her cruel, she was being cruel to be kind, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And so, but as a child, you don't read it that way. You only see the cruelty.
Yeah.
So I really related and felt bad for the mother character.
I think the father definitely that's what he grew up with, fueled by a hard life, fueled by alcohol. Um, I think that really touched on, like, in the chapter in the book, kids in the kids in houses where alcohol and drugs are abused. It's chaotic. Like, that was, I like, not that I liked that they used that word, but it's true. I mean, her life was chaotic. She never knew when dad was going to be nice. Is dad going to come home and drag me through the ground again? Is dad going to hit mom? And I think that kind of was where, because he clearly changed when he stopped drinking. And as far as I know, it seemed like he wasn't drinking anymore in the end. Like, and he was so proud of her. And, that moment in the parade where he was like, my daughter, like, that was a big turning point. So I think a lot of the dad, I'm not excusing his actions, but I think that it was a lot of, like, what you're saying, generational, like, he didn't know because that wasn't modeled for him, and he didn't know how to break the cycle. And then he added to it by drinking. And then I'm sure the emotional warfare of, like, they're losing their kids is not helping either.
Yeah.
Mom sitting at the grave of the kids and being sad, that probably didn't help his mental relationship either. So I think a lot of, when I read about how his dad beat him, I did
Yeah.
kind of feel bad. So I was like, "Ew."
Um,
Or-
you touched a
Go ahead.
chord with my kids now that they're becoming parents, and when they were expecting their children, and they come and they'd be, oh gosh, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I have no experience and stuff. The one saying that I always say to them is, um, we do what we know until we know to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, meaning that you're doing the best, parents do the best they can.
Mhm.
And often we reflect back and we're like, oh, I could have done it this way, or I could have done it that way. And we evolve as people and we become better as we know better. The more we know, we're probably better parents to the third child than we were to the first child, because we just know better. And
Yeah.
not necessarily better parents, meaning that we're, the first child you want to wrap in bubble wrap, and nobody, they can't have be around any germs, and they can't and then by the third child, you're like, they drop the binky on the floor, you stick it in your mouth, and then you stick it
Yeah.
in there. It's like, oh well, you know, you just don't know what you don't know until you know it. And I kind of feel like, so you depend on that generational knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, and even if you think, there's something wrong with this, you feel like, well, I didn't turn out so bad, so it must
Yeah.
have worked.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing, well, maybe it's not working with this, because all of us are different, right? Each child is different. What works for one kid doesn't work for another. And that's one thing when you become a parent, you think, oh, if I follow A, B, C, D, E, F, G in this book. I am going to be the perfect parent, and my child is going to be the perfect child. But children, and as a teacher, you know this extremely well. What works for one child does not work for every
Yeah.
child. And so applying different knowledge to different children is something that we have to learn and be more flexible about, instead of a one-stop shop for everybody as parents and as teachers.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of this is going to be twofold just based on our discussion. Like, so clearly, like, she was exploited, and her parents, I mean, honestly, just kind of from our conversation, you know, her parents probably believed, like, we're going to provide this better life for her. She's going to go live with this family. We're going to get some money sent back, right? So, like, clearly, like, they were exploited, and she was clearly exploited in the family. Like, where do we think, like, where the people who are in power, right? Like, what do we think their motivations were? Do we think they ever had true intentions to her, like, to care for her, or was it always like, we essentially want free labor?
I think that maybe for a while Carlitos like actually cared. Because in the beginning it did, it was like, oh, well, at least he's around. She doesn't beat him when
Yeah.
he's around until it
Yeah.
turns uncomfortable. But I think at the beginning it was like, I think he did care for her. And I think Dr. Rita just did not. Like, I didn't see any part of her
Yeah.
relationship in the book that
She
pictured
felt
her.
very irredeemable to me. Like, I
Yes.
didn't, because you knew that she wasn't going to believe her if she ever said anything about what was happening. Like, you knew that it was always a lose-lose situation. And so, like, I don't know, I was always sort of like, well, why did you even want her? And I
Right.
guess, you know, just to raise your kids, essentially. And
Yeah. I think she
yeah,
also wanted, I think she truly was hungry for power and control.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
was like, that was an easy control for her, was somebody who to her is based on her prejudice and her stereotypes is less than her already.
yeah,
And so I can control this person who I view as less and make her do what I want. But she didn't expect that she would have someone who was as spunky as she
yeah,
was, where, she just fought back for everything and fought for herself. I mean, even at the end of the book, Dr. Rita pretends to be, oh, my
oh,
daughter,
yeah,
blah. And then the second that she said, I want to go to school, she was like, stupid longa or whatever she called
yeah,
her. But I was like, this woman is just not, she is not.
yeah,
It also, I read the author's note, and
mm-hmm,
maybe
Mm-hmm.
in it was interesting to see that that was the norm in their culture
yeah,
for the indigenous young girls to go serve with the mestizas. So I think that that was also why Virginia ended up there, because they didn't know any better. They were like,
yeah.
that's it's just normal that she goes there and she comes home and then we farm and
Yeah, I was like, did the family ever get any money? Like, not that it
I
matters,
know,
but
but
you know, like, because they were just lied to, like, because they thought you're gonna come home like every month, we're gonna get to see you, and then they never, you know. And I think too that led to that miscommunication you were mentioning earlier, Rebecca, of like, she believed like, oh, my mother never wanted to see me again. She didn't even ever try to find me, and they're like, we did, but we had no idea, you know, where you were going.
Right.
That was heartbreaking to me. It reminded me a lot of like, and I know you mentioned you have a book about like some of the Indian schools, like especially the scene when she was about to
Yeah.
cut her hair. I thought that was probably my favorite sequence, because she was talking about all the years in her hair and everything. I thought that was really beautiful symbolism.
I had this, like, Carlitos.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like he was grooming her.
Yeah,
yes.
I saw that too. There was like, at first I was
Like,
like, oh, he seems fine. And then I started to get the ick,
Yeah, then I
as
was
the
like,
kids say.
oh, he's
yes, even when he was,
uncomfortable.
even when she was little and he
Yeah.
was being so kind to her, that's the road I thought it was going down, because it felt very grooming. It felt very, I'm the only male you can trust, and it's us against Dr.
Hmm.
Regis,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and the wink wink nudge nudge will, I'll let you get away with stuff that she doesn't and stuff. So it felt very grooming to me, and very dark. I didn't see it as a positive relationship at all. um I think she saw it that way, because she had never had an adult in her life treat her that way. um but isn't that what people like that look for? Is a
Hmm.
vulnerable person who
Yeah.
doesn't have adults that are like that. So I just, from the very, like, the get-go, I was just waiting for that shoe to drop,
Yeah.
because I felt that he was grooming her from the very beginning. And I thought
Yeah.
it was going to drop when she was younger than she was.
Yeah. No, well, and especially like when she was hiding her period and everything, like that whole section, like I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah. And when
Um,
it kept saying how Dr. Ritas kept getting larger and larger and
yes,
more
yeah,
unappealing to him, and how their fights were getting worse and worse, I thought, okay, this is going to go real, real bad for her,
yeah,
because all this time he spent grooming her, it would be real easy for her to give in, because he's that figure for her and she wants to win his love.
yeah, yeah. She wants to win anybody's love. And I thought
Right.
I really liked that, like, kind of once she got out and she like found her way to school and in the hotel, that like she found people who loved her so freely and
Mhm.
Right.
accepted her for who she was. It was like she felt like she still had to hide herself, but like they loved her even when she truly revealed who she was. I thought that was, you know,
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. And like, I think that's why I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm
Yeah.
glad that, she's not having to, and that when she gave her speech and she didn't try to fake it, that she was like,
Right.
they took my language from me. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, and it tied it back to Words on Fire for me, when she said that,
Yeah.
that they were trying
Yeah.
to strip me of who my
Yes,
culture.
Right.
for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They made her ashamed.
Yeah. Well, I think like you were saying, like this book hits on like so many, different things. Like the chapter was like abuse, divorce, abandonment, not divorce, but I mean marital problems.
Yeah.
Like, and I think when I was first reading the chapter, I was sort of like, I don't know, like these are difficult topics, right? Like was there anything that when you were kind of reading the text, not the book, but like our textbook, like topics that you immediately are like, I don't like for me, abuse is like a terrifying door to open in a classroom setting, because none of us really know where kids are, and then like mandated reporting and all of that. Like, was there anything that sort of, I think this book is addresses a lot, because originally I was like, oh, would this book make it more approachable? Like before I'd finished the book, and I'm like, oh, it literally checks off everything.
Yeah.
But is there anything that like you feel like would be a challenge for you to kind of consider having like either in your classroom library or a part of topics you address? Is there anything particularly that is like a big, I'm scared to kind of do that?
What's interesting about teaching in a Catholic school is, because of all the things with the priests and all the abuse
Hmm.
with the priests, that is the thing that we are required. Every
Hmm.
5 years we have to take we have to be recertified in abuse,
Hmm.
and not just sexual, but
Yeah.
overall child
Mhm.
abuse. And every month we have to recertify by reading an article. They send us an article in our email. We read the article and we have to answer questions for the article, and
Hmm.
that's our recertification monthly. So if we are if we know anything, it is about child abuse and reporting and being mandated reporters and what the steps are to take and stuff. I mean, I mean, we are inundated with information about that. So that's probably one of the things that I'm most comfortable dealing with.
Do you talk about that with your students? Like, do you have conversations about abuse like blatantly, or is it just sort of, you know what you're looking for?
So when it's for instance, I teach for summer reading, they do the Glass Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is all about child abuse. I mean, neglect, sexual abuse. I mean, there's just it runs the gamut. So when we're talking about that book and we hit those issues, then we talk about it. So in the classroom, it's usually when I do this tender land,
Mm-hmm.
there's it's not overt, it's implied sexual abuse. And the kids, the first time I taught the book, the kids came in after the chapter that deals with that, and they're like, did that mean that he was abusing him? And I said, yes, that's what they were implying. And they're like, oh, oh, or when my ninth graders, because of course when we talk about Oedipus Rex, and they're like, and we get into the incest talk
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And, the funniest things come out of some of their mouths, and you're like trying to have a serious about these things. But as it's appropriate, we talk about it. But all the students know we have they have a kind of, in their religion classes, they have kind of a mini Virtus.
Mm-hmm.
That's the program. It's called Virtus. And they are taught, who they can go to, what our responsibility is,
Okay.
that, we can't keep certain things secret.
Right.
We can keep it confidential, which is different than keeping a
Yes.
secret.
Yeah.
So they explain that to them in their religion classes and stuff like that. So they go through their own little kind of Virtus program as it's age appropriate in their religion classes, so that they understand that when they disclose something to an adult, the adult is not betraying their confidence. The adult is trying to do what's best for them. And, it's all done. Not everybody has to know about it. We're not going to tell everybody in the world, but there's certain people that have to know and stuff like that, and how that goes, and they can, and who they can go talk to. We have our priests are there. They can go and have a confidential session with the priest. And if it's in the confessional, he really can't say anything unless he knows they're in danger or whatever. So I feel sorry for the priests, because they skirt this kind of line that
Yeah.
they can and cannot do. But the rest of us, we encourage them to come talk to us, and then we have a like chain of command that it goes
Mhm.
through
Yeah.
once the child reports to us. So
Um, I definitely wouldn't include abuse in my class, but I do think that it's important to have that kind of relationship, that safe space built where the kids
Mm-hmm.
know they can tell me. Um, my first year, I actually did have a kid tell me, and if I cry, I'm sorry, because it was like literally to this day, I still think about that kid and like, what is he, where is he now? Is he still in that situation? But he literally told me about what was happening to him. And it was like, my heart just like sank to my stomach. And I was like, you don't have the right words to say to them,
Yeah.
and it's like, it was just so, and so reading all of this, I'm just like, if she had someone to go to, which with her situation have turned out differently, if she had someone that she felt safe telling them about, you know, and maybe that's why they didn't want to put her in school, because maybe they felt like she
Yeah.
might
Well,
have.
and I think too that, so much of this story is about like the power of in education, right? And like we do have all these systems and these chain of command, and that might not have existed there, but like even when she ran to that house for that night,
Yeah.
right? Like those people were ready to help protect her, but even then, again, cycle abuse, she like went back to the house for that night
Yeah.
and felt the guilt. And yeah, like if she'd had other eyes on her, would someone have gotten her out sooner? So
Well, it is about the book's also about power because
yeah,
Right.
like the stick and the carrot, right? The
yeah,
carrot was we'll let you go to school if you do this, or if you do that,
yeah.
if you do this. That's the carrot, and then the stick was the abuse. So it, I thought that a lot of the book was about power relationships too.
For sure. Well, and like it's interesting because really even where she ended up that was better, they were still pretty much in poverty, right? Like it was
Yeah.
like everyone is just abusing anyone who's less than them because you want to do whatever you can do to keep power.
Right.
Which I think definitely goes into like exploitation. Like I feel like we saw that a lot. Is there anything else? We've got a little bit of time. Was there anything else that you sort of feel like we missed or major moments from the book that you kind of want to touch on or questions you might have?
I just the saddest part of the book for me was her relationship with those two little boys.
Oh yeah.
And and how she had to leave. She was basically their mother,
Yeah.
and she had to leave them behind. And I thought that was so sad for them and for her.
Well, and how they tried to protect her in some of those instances, like from their own mother, like that to me was heartbreaking. And
yeah, and she didn't have that type of relationship with her own siblings.
yes,
That
I know.
closeness with her own siblings. So this was kind of her childhood relationships, and I just thought it was that was to me that was the saddest part of the book, was that she had to leave those two little boys because she was kind of she was their protector and they were hers.
Well, and they were
Yeah.
the only reason that she wanted to go back, and that
Yeah.
he knew what knife to twist. Like,
Yeah.
you can't leave the children alone. That manipulation was really
Yeah.
just so sad.
Yeah, that was the hardest part for me in this. And I really like in all these books that they have the authors um notes afterwards, and you get to read and see kind of the author's purpose and the author's
Yeah.
motivation and stuff, and it really brings it all into context.
Yeah. It was cool how they just randomly met in Colorado.
Yeah, I know.
So I was like, good for her out here in the States. And that
Well,
she has her own business and like just the things that she was listing off about Virginia. I was like, wow, like that's empowering. And I'm sure for like if you were to use this with kids, like
well,
obviously
and
not first graders, but
I guess you can like email her through the author on her website. And she's like, if you email her in Spanish, it's better. And she'll usually get back to you in a couple weeks. And I just thought that was really neat that like, that she's sort of using her platform to like also like elevate Virginia. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
she could have just been
right,
like, here's this novel that I wrote, but she's like,
right.
no, I want to keep her central and forefront.
Yeah.
No, I thought, yeah, I was glad because it was really, the first two parts were really tough for me. I think just because I was like, this is going to be so painful.
I know.
I was just worried it was going to, it reminded me of A Child Called It. I don't know if you've ever read that book,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's a really tough book about this little boy, like, and the abuse he suffered at the hands of his like alcoholic mother. Like she called him it. And so like, it was just, and his eventually has a good turnaround, but I was just like, is this just going to be awful the whole time?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to handle
sad.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're good. So
Yeah.
like we had some good, it's always nice to see you all.
Yep. So
do-
when are we doing our next
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, so the next, do we want to just do 2 weeks from now, or the next module ends later? I don't know if she was trying to give us like secretly our like most school spring break off.
When's
But
the
do
next
we
one
want?
due?
Does it
It
end like the
said
14th?
it said I think I was looking today, and I think it said the 21st, but that could be
Oh,
wrong. Do we?
I thought it was the 14th. Hold on.
Okay, yeah, but we can just say the 10th, same time.
Let's see.
I don't have my planner with me, otherwise I would know.
Um, March 17th. No, you are right. It's the 21st, April 8th through the 21st.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
see, I know. We can just. Do we want to just do the 10th, or do we want to do the 17th? I'm fine either way.
I'm actually fine either way too.
Let's do the 10th. That way we
Okay.
can just
Yeah, get it
chill.
done.
Yeah,
I know I'd rather wrap up earlier. Okay,
right.
Yeah, that way we only have the final exam left.
Yeah.
True.
beautiful.
I actually liked how this class was set up because I finished everything early